Hello and welcome to Attachment Maps. My name is Carl and I've been learning about attachment theory since 2018. I'm here to offer you attachment insights that no one else is talking about. Today we take a look at the late Paul Reubens, also known by his character's name, Pee Wee Herman. Reubens was a comedian and actor who catapulted to fame in the 1980s with the show Pee Wee's Playhouse and Pee Wee's Big Adventure. I will be analyzing Reubens' attachment pattern using the HBO Pee Wee as Himself documentary as my source material, which I would encourage you to watch. In my analysis, I will be using principles from the Adult Attachment Interview, which is a semi-structured interview known to be the gold standard of attachment assessments, as well as principles from the related Adult Attachment Projective Picture System, which is a projective or free response assessment not unlike the Rorschach that involves telling stories about fictional characters. I will also be drawing from my own general understanding of and experience with attachment theory and attachment behaviors. I want to be clear that this is not a psychological assessment or diagnosis. I am offering my opinions based on a limited amount of available material. Ideally, assessments like this are done one-on-one using predetermined stimuli with careful adherence to protocol. The goal of this analysis is not just to try to determine the attachment pattern of Paul Reubens, it's also to use the analysis as an opportunity to educate you about attachment theory. So, let's get into it. I'm going to start by presenting chunks of Paul Reubens' autobiographical narrative, then offer my judgment about his attachment classification, and then explain in detail how I came to that conclusion. Here are some clips from his childhood. Reubens starts by describing what he could remember.
Like when you ask me what are my earliest memories, I almost short circuit. Before I have full memories, I have kind of like half memories or dreamy sort of memories of patterns and colors and staring at like the wallpaper in my bedroom when I was a kid. I wanted to jump into my TV and live in that world.
Reubens eventually talks about his parents, about whom he had this to say.
My parents almost were like a vaudeville team. Like they would yell and scream and fight all the time, but it was always kind of funny. My mother would read to me fairy tales and nursery rhymes and stories and like would just create these worlds. My dad had a big personality. He was really a lot like Indiana Jones, like a swashbuckler, daredevil pilot.
Reubens includes a number of descriptions of how he saw himself and how that contrasted with his father.
Alfalfa wore his heart on his sleeve. Alfalfa was always kind of like so pure and so serious. But I was like a combination of Alfalfa and Spanky, and that Spanky was the entrepreneur. Spanky was always like, we're putting on the show, how much are we charging? I took myself very seriously, and I was very, I'm an actor, I'm an aspiring actor, and it's not a hobby, I'm very serious about it. My dad had a lot of bravado. My dad was like macho and swaggery. I was extremely sensitive and romantic. My personality was just very different.
Once an adult, Reubens leaves home and moves to California to attend a private art school known as Cal Arts. When he arrives, his fears are allayed when he realizes that everyone there is a lot like him, and actually, he is the attraction. He notes that he has a particular interest in conceptual performance art.
When I got to Cal Arts, I got there and I was the attraction. People were like, wow, you are wild. Oh, yeah. Everyone there was like avant-garde and kooky, and like I felt like I could just be as crazy and as wild as I wanted to be. It was just like this little safe community of people. The whole idea of performance art and conceptual art, it spoke to me.
Things get interesting when he suddenly falls in love with another artist named Guy Brown. Reubens describes Brown as extremely artistic and admits that he stole some of his material from him.
When I got there, I looked across the room and saw someone and fell in love instantly. Just went, that's him. That's the guy. He was a painter who was extremely artistic and extremely funny. I stole a lot of material from Guy.
Reubens describes the relationship as playing house, and although his parents seem supportive of his same-sex relationship and homosexuality, Reubens admits that he struggled in a long-term serious relationship, citing a fear of losing himself and losing his motivation to pursue his acting career. He felt like he had to choose between a career and a relationship, and eventually, the relationship collapses for somewhat vague reasons that Reubens doesn't deeply explore.
It was a little bit like kind of playing house. I hadn't done any of that before. I'd barely lived on my own. Both my parents were extremely supportive immediately. I was in a long-term, very serious relationship, and I kind of lost a lot of my self and my ambition. We had this incredible time, and then we didn't. I lost my entire personality and myself in being with somebody else and being part of a duo. I was really confused by it, and I got so freaked out. I didn't want to be emotionally involved with anybody in that way. When we split up, I just made a conscious decision and went, I'm not doing this again. I not only wasn't going to be openly gay, but I wasn't going to be in a relationship.
Deciding to forego romantic relationships in favor of his career ambitions, Reubens refocuses on his love for conceptual experimental performance. From trial and error, he discovers that his Pee Wee Herman character has the most public appeal, and so he pursues more opportunities to play that role.
My plan was to make people think that Pee Wee Herman was a real person. You will believe this is a real person, and if you start to go like, is it? I don't know. I would be like, no, it's real. And it is now, and it's now, and it's going to stay like that. And so that is, to me, what pushed it over into conceptual art and performance art and a big secret.
Reubens sees Pee Wee as a kind of real person that gives him the ability to influence people, an ability to control an alter ego, as well as an ability to use Pee Wee Herman as an opportunity to let the real him disappear.
And so I thought, I'm going to take Pee Wee Herman, the character that I've had the most success with and that people have really reacted to, and the rest of these characters and Paul Reubens are going to disappear. I'm used to being the person who gets to manipulate and move around and strategize about my alter ego.
And lastly, I want to mention that after some failed attempts to get hired on shows like Saturday Night Live, Reubens resolves to take control and do it all by himself. As we know, this eventually leads him to fame.
After SNL, I panicked to the degree that I devised a plan to kind of take control and not be at the mercy of like, no, should we, can we change your life by putting on SNL? I thought, I'll change my life. I'll do this myself.
Based on Reubens' first-person account, I judged him to be dismissing of attachment. Now, I'm going to be looking closely at aspects of his narrative and explaining how I derived my conclusion and what the details might mean. Lack of memory. Dismissing individuals often have trouble with autobiographical memory, especially of childhood and emotional events. In the adult attachment interview, there is a specific scale for insistence on lack of memory for childhood. Reubens starts the documentary by admitting that his brain short circuits when trying to remember his childhood. The first details he does provide are dissociative, like staring at wallpaper or wanting to jump into the TV, as if to take attention away from attachment figures and redirect his focus on inanimate things around him. In the adult attachment projective, one of the markers of dismissing attachment is an inattention to attachment distress. The characters in the fictional stories often engage in book reading, TV watching, video game playing, or sleep in order to distract themselves from attachment. Idealization. The most significant indicator of dismissing attachment in the adult attachment interview is idealization or derogation of parents. Reubens' description of his parents, especially his father, is never negative and always in positive, glowing terms.
When I was at the Groundlings, I tried to be strategic and tried to be like my father, streetwise and smart and kind of like practical.
He paints his father as a heroic, larger-than-life adventurer.
I would, as a 4 and 5-year-old, be sitting in my living room thinking to myself, these can't be my real parents. My real parents somehow are Lucy and Desi. Like, this can't be my life. Like, wake me up from this dream. Like, come on. Like, how am I ever getting out of Oneon to New York and getting to Hollywood?
This tendency to idealize or derogate is one reason why it's so important to read between the lines of what the interviewee is saying during the adult attachment interview. It's typical for people who are dismissing of attachment to claim that parents were loving, but then find it impossible to provide any supporting anecdotes from their childhood. The dismissing individual wants to portray a certain image, but there are often cracks in their stories. Here are a few examples. Reubens mentions that his parents fought all the time, but downplays it by describing them as funny and compares them to professional comedians. His only mention of quality time with his mother was his mother reading to him, which may sound like a marker of secure attachment to the layperson, but researchers would immediately recognize this kind of behavior as instrumental, aka functional care. Examples of instrumental care would include caretaking behaviors like feeding a child or taking a child on a vacation. Attachment behavior, on the other hand, focuses on soothing distress and emotional attunement. Reubens describes his childhood as unsupervised, which could easily be a code word for neglect.
They are kids completely unsupervised. And my childhood was like that.
Reubens' frequent mentions of his parents positively responding to his performances imply an otherwise scarcity of attention from his caregivers.
My parents were like, we were sitting there and all of a sudden you come out and you put on the blindfold and you got your Speedo on. We didn't know what to think. Like, it was incredible. So I think that was an early kind of experience with my parents, you know, kind of realizing my fabulousness. I wanted to be an actor from a very, very early age. I wanted to be the focus of everyone's attention.
One trait his parents do seem to exhibit is supportiveness, which is an attachment-related condition. They encourage his interest in acting and are immediately accepting of his same-sex relationship. At the same time, there are questions about how supportive they really were. Reubens' sister mentions that their parents generally didn't allow them to do what they wanted as kids.
My parents never wanted us to do the things that we really wanted to do.
Reubens explains that at one point during his teens, his father offered a warning that his friend Keith was a known homosexual.
My mother and father said, we want to talk to you about something. And my father said, you know, your friend Keith is a known homosexual. I don't know if you know that. And I was like, yeah, I'm aware of that.
And even though Reubens said he received an incredible letter from his father, the only thing Reubens mentions is one line, his father's encouragement to be the best homosexual he could be, after which Reubens makes a joke and then seemingly moves right on to the next subject.
My father did write me an incredible letter and said, son, if you are homosexual, I want you to know that I hope you're going to be the greatest homosexual you can be. And I went out that night to try to be the greatest. No, I'm kidding.
Later, Reubens recalls that he had a sense that he was a disappointment to his father.
Family has arrived! Hi, Mom! And here's my dad!
I always felt like I wasn't really like what my dad might have been wanting or expecting.
Reubens' sister also claims that their parents were supportive, but doesn't mention anything specific besides financial support.
It made my parents proud, and I could tell he liked that. They were very supportive of his career and financially helped him. They helped all of us. I mean, that's an advantage of coming from privilege.
Lastly, there was the favorite line that his father would repeat to him.
My father used to always say, "You weren't born, you were found under a rock." That was one of his favorite lines.
Now, I don't want to overanalyze here, but this sounds like a bit of a backhanded compliment, which individuals with dismissive attachment are known for. It may be positive, but I'm not sure how I feel about it and if this is really the most secure thing to say to a child. View of self. In dismissing attachment, self-image is important. It's no surprise that Reubens' top priority for the documentary is clearing his name and restoring his reputation following the allegations he faced in the early 90s and 2000s. In the adult attachment interview, an indicator of dismissing attachment is a positive view of the self as independent, strong, and normal. Reubens' mother noticed how cocksure he was at an early age.
My mother would sometimes say to me, "That's right, Paul. Everyone must be wrong but you." And this is what I would say back sometimes as a young person. "That's right, Mom. That's right."
Reubens admits that as a child he would watch Disney films starring Kevin Corcoran, finding himself unimpressed with his performances.
I would like watch Kevin Corcoran perform and just be like, I could do that so much better.
In the adult attachment projective, the view of the self as strong and dismissing attachment is incorporated into several indicators. Individuals with dismissing attachment may react to distress by bringing to mind themes of achievement, status, or competition. Some examples of this would be to call a character in a story a fashion model, rock star, president, or doctor. It's quite noteworthy then that when Reubens speaks of visiting his ex-boyfriend on his deathbed, he vacillates between distress and attachment system activation and trying to act normal and thinking of himself as an actor.
I knew he was sick, and I just remember, I'm an actor, and he was somebody extremely important to me. And so I just tried really hard to be normal and to act kind of like, oh, hi. But to talk about seeing somebody at death's door, that's what that was. And he probably died within a couple hours of that time.
In this vein, it may also be worth noting that after Reubens' move to San Francisco following college, he was interested in joining a well-known psychedelic drag theater troupe, which he describes here.
I was going to try to join a group called the Angels of Light, and they were an offshoot of a group called the Coquettes. Each person had a persona. They were like clowns mixed with guerrilla theater, mixed with drag queens, mixed with rock and roll. I was just like, this is for me.
Reubens also seemed quite competitive and controlling. Remember, he feared he would be overshadowed at Cal Arts.
I got into an art school called Cal Arts, and immediately I started to be anxious about like, what's this going to be like? Am I going to be overshadowed by how way out and avant-garde everybody is?
He talks about controlling and manipulating his alter ego, and he was known as hard to work with because he was such a perfectionist. In the documentary, there are multiple references to his controlling nature.
It turns out that you're not really supposed to direct your own documentary. You're not supposed to control your own documentary. I not only wasn't going to be openly gay, but I wasn't going to be in a relationship. I was going to advance my career because I could control that.
He's calculating, but you're not watching him calculate. You're just seeing the result of somebody who's in control. He's just always in control on stage.
I felt like I had some kind of like little superpower where I could just be like, I can move people, I can cause a reaction. Even if it's like, God, that voice, I'm gonna kill myself. That's something.
And while perfectionism could be explained by his detail-orientedness, it's often a mistake to attribute traits to only one cause, in this case, personality. It's very possible that Reubens was both high-trait conscientious and avoided uncertainty and helplessness due to his dismissing attachment. The dismissing view of self as independent, strong, and normal is a protective shell and requires a lot of resources to maintain. This mask is fragile and has a tendency to break down under stress, to reveal a negative self-evaluation underneath. We see hints of Reubens' low self-image in his comparison of himself to the character Spanky in The Little Rascals, in contrast to Alfalfa. He lamented how he was the opposite of his father, not macho, but goofy, sensitive, and romantic.
I mean, I just didn't look like the nebbishy, dorky like kid that I felt at the time. Those photos made me look glamorous. I don't even look like that, I mean, that's how I want to look.
His alter ego, Pee Wee Herman, could be seen as a projection of his negative self-evaluation, an aspiring comedian who is nerdy, weak, and neutered. Secrecy. Reubens exhibits several moments where he presents himself or is presented as being a private, secretive person. When he is vulnerable, he downplays it with humor.
At the same time, I had many, many secretive relationships.
But he's very private. He didn't really talk about his personal life all that much.
No, I don't really think that. All right, maybe I do think that a little bit. No, I don't. I'm kidding. Or am I? I don't know. I don't know if I'm kidding. I know. But you don't. That's why you can't depend on anything I'm saying. All this gay stuff, I was sleep deprived. I didn't have food. If I said I was gay, I knew I could leave earlier.
Reubens' immersion in the character of Pee Wee Herman and his attempts to convince people that he was real was a way to remain private and hide his personal life. Left brain versus right brain. Dismissing attachment is a condition marked by left hemisphere dominance and right brain deficit. This right brain deficiency could explain Reubens' admiration of his boyfriend Guy's visual artistry. The right brain has an ability to describe things in ways that are sensory, while the left brain simply states facts. Guy's right brain ability to describe the flavors he was experiencing when he ate left a lasting impact on Reubens.
One thing that he would say all the time when he would be eating anything that would be rich, and he would do it in this voice, he would go, buttery, or chocolatey. And I think you can see where that led me.
Reubens repeatedly described himself as a conceptual performer. Conceptual art is focused on the abstract, on the planning and the idea, rather than the quality of the artistic skill and the execution of the art. There's a reason why Reubens had to outsource the visual design of Pee Wee's Playhouse to artists like Gary Panter. Reubens' left brain mode may have contributed to his love of things and play, resulting in his massive collection of vintage toys and magazines, and is downplaying the seriousness of his relationship by repeatedly calling it playing house. In the adult attachment projective, we know that individuals with dismissing attachment often redirect attachment distress to the affiliate or sexual systems. In other words, to friendship and romance.
I decided to really amp up the romantic side of Pee Wee Herman. One thing that I was focused on for a while was Pee Wee's kiss with his leading lady would be the longest kiss in screen history. I know there were 600 students there because I kissed every single student there on Valentine's Day. It was a cute icebreaker to have a kissing booth at an art school in 1971, if you catch my drift.
This is why Reubens had no issue kissing every college classmate on Valentine's Day, or starting a raunchy comedy show that would, despite his original intentions, eventually become a show for children. We can see the left brain's focus on the verbal in the Pee-wee's Playhouse episodic Secret Word segment.
Today's secret word is
Fun! Today's secret word is fun!
Less time, less risk. Reubens' longtime personal assistant, Allison Berry, remarked that during his last days, Reubens seemed to have been living life to the fullest, and was even in what sounds like a serious relationship.
In the last months of Paul's life, he was in a loving relationship. He was surrounded by his closest friends. He had a lot of joy. I think he was embracing the fullness of his life in those last days.
In my experience, when a person with dismissing attachment can see the finish line, they tend to be willing to engage in more emotional connection. For example, during the last hour of a date, a dismissing partner may become unusually warm. This makes sense because the less time left with their partner, the less risk there is of being hurt, and so it's easier to be more vulnerable. Knowing you can escape lessens fear and anxiety. I hope you've enjoyed this analysis and learned a lot about attachment theory. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.